In this video, I'll tell you all about magnetic reed switches, all you need to know about how to wire one up and where to use them. All magnetic reed switches come with a controller. The controller controls the switching, and mine runs off a 12 to 24 volt power supply. So here we have your reed magnet, and that just goes into a door or something, and that controls the switch in there depending on the distance. As it goes further away, it'll switch that power out on, and that'll be your power in supply. So power in, and then it'll go to power out to your LED light. Now firstly I had to see what it switched, whether it switched the negative or the positive or both. If it switched the positive, we were all sweet for the RGB or RGBW lighting, but because it switched the negative, we had to use a relay. So onto our diagram that I've got here. Here we have the transformer, and that gets powered from our 240 volt plug, and that's what we use in Australia. And then a 24 volt supply goes to our reed controller as power in, and then our power out goes to our strip light here. Typically when you're using a magnetic reed switch, you're usually powering just one light, a single coloured light, and that's all. So as you can see here, from the transformer we've got the power that goes into the reed switch, and then that powers the reed controller. Now after that you've got the switch part, which is controlled by the magnet. So this is when the magnet comes close, it controls that part. As you can see here, we've got the switch mechanism, looks like that, and that gets controlled by the magnet itself. This magnetic reed controller can be controlled by 4 separate inputs, so you can have 4 separate switches operating the same light. And now you've got your power out, that goes to your light, and this is whatever your transformer can produce. So 24 volt in, 24 volt out, straight to your light, positive and negative. And as I said earlier, it switches the negative. So here we have the transformer, and once you plug it in, it's always on. And then after that, the power goes out and it goes into your reed controller. And now we wait for an input from the reed switch. So that gets controlled by the magnet, and it goes depending on the distance of the magnet to the switch itself. And I measured mine to be about 40 mil, but it can vary between the position of the magnet, what's in between it, and the rotation of the magnet as well. This is the general setup. With the power on, the power goes through the transformer into the reed controller, and having the magnet close, there's no power output. Now the magnet goes past the threshold, in which turns the power output on. So now we're doing it with RGBW or RGB lighting, either. So RGBW, we have our red, green, blue, and it goes in this order, positive and white. Now these are all negatives, and with these all being negatives, as you can see, there'll be a little problem. So we'll have our negative that comes out, and we'll have our positive that comes out. And this being a negative switching reed controller, you put the positive in positive, what are you going to do with negative? You can't just switch a colour. But if this was a positive switching reed controller, or a dual switching reed controller, we'll just have the positive in the positive, and the negative can not be in use at all, can just be left out. And this is what it would have looked like. So I would have had the negative just in the controller, the positive switch in the positive, and all the colours coming out. And if you'd like to see in more detail, I'll now do it with all the real live parts in there. So with all the parts here, we've got the transformer, and then we've also got the reed controller, but I'll just leave that out for the time being. And we also have the RGBW or RGB lighting controller, all the colours on it. So we've got our red, green, blue, positive and white. Now these will all go into the relay. So here we have the relay with your coil, so it'll have positive, negative at the coil, and that'll control the solenoid in there, and that'll get hooked up to your power output of your reed controller. At the relay you'll also have the switch, the contact itself, and that would just be a positive input and a positive output, and that would go straight into your positive of your LED strip. Now from your color controller, so we've got all the negatives that come out, and they go straight to all your lighting, so your red, your blue, your green and your white. So here's your reed controller, and there's your magnet, and this power output would actually be plugged into the relay itself. Here we have the relay, and there's your coils. So you've got your positive and negative that go into there. And each side on this relay has your contactor. So normally open, normally closed, normally open, normally closed, and that'll just switch between each other. Now with the magnet in place, the magnet now goes further from the threshold. It turns negative on, which turns the coil on, which flicks the contactor from normally closed to normally open, or normally open to normally closed. So it'll flick the contact between, in which will turn the switch on. Now positive will flow straight into the LED strip, turning the LED light on. As you can see, I wired everything up for a live test. I've got the 240 volt power input. I've got the two outputs of the 24 volt side of the transformer, which goes one to the read controller and one to the color wheel controller. Then I've got the output of the read controller that goes into the relay coil. Then I've also got the positive that comes out of the touch wheel controller that goes into the contactor of the relay, which therefore goes into the LED light strip. Now we've got power, and now it's on. See that? So the magnet is close, and everything turns off. You can't use a color wheel, nothing. But as the magnet goes further away, you'll hear the relay contact, the relay solenoid kick out, and you'll hear the contactor connect, and the lights turn on.